Welcome to the CPM Customer Success Podcast, where we help Office of Finance leaders enable an exact solution to enhance their corporate performance without spending countless nights and weekends in the office. I am your host, Andy Smetana from Nova Advisory. Nova Advisory is a 100% OneStream professional services diamond implementation partner. We help OneStream customers and prospective OneStream customers get the most out of their OneStream investments. And for CPM Customer Success listeners, we now have a weekly email newsletter to keep you informed on the latest CPM Customer Success news. By subscribing today, you'll keep informed on episode releases, including customer success stories, OneStream interviews, and capabilities to keep you informed about OneStream's unified platform for finance. So check that out now at Nova Advisory's website, novaadvisory.com/podcast, and subscribe to the CPM Customer Success Podcast newsletter today. So any finance leader considering a OneStream implementation, you're going to want to pay special and close attention to this episode. We have guest Susan Maron, Chief of Staff at Nova Advisory, and Susan drops a ton of insights tailored to finance and accounting leaders and what to do to prepare for your OneStream project, and also what to do to set yourself up for success even before you start the project. So let's get started with this episode now. Today on CPM Customer Success, we have a special guest, Susan Maron, who is Chief of Staff at Nova Advisory. Susan's been on our podcast in multiple episodes, and I'm going to cover those in a second, but please say hello, Susan.
Hello, happy to be here with you again today, Andy.
All right, thank you. It's great to have you. So, Susan, you were on, and just for guests that are listening, they would like to, I'm sure they're going to love hearing what you have to say today and want to go revisit prior episodes. You're on previous episode 14, which you spoke with our CEO, Nate Coate, about OneStream Splash 2024, so last year's Splash, and really how OneStream helps empower organizations take finance further, which was the theme of Splash last year. And then we had you on another, just a solo one-on-one interview with myself on episode 9, where you talked about really preparing, as a finance leader, preparing your organization, your people for the OneStream change. And you're one of our leading experts in change, and I would say an industry expert in change and helping customers navigate that change to achieve successful outcomes. But on that episode, we focused on just really the people aspects. We talked about the before, the during, and the after of a OneStream implementation. But I wanted to have you back today and really talk more from a finance leadership perspective, because that's our primary audience, are finance and accounting leaders. Mm-hmm. And so I thought we'd expand upon that in this conversation. We could talk about really change from the finance leadership point of view, before, during, and after OneStream implementation, not just people related, but really anything that might come to mind.
Okay. Right.
And yeah, so that's enough of me talking. Susan, as Chief of Staff of Nova Advisory, you play several different roles, and one of them is really helping our customers achieve successful outcomes. So could you start us off by describing that aspect of your role?
Yeah, certainly. So occasionally as a Chief of Staff, I am involved in the delivery portion of what we do for OneStream. And that is heavily involved in change management, as you alluded to. It's preparing our customer or client for what's coming and really helping to point out the areas that we've seen as commonalities across our client base where they've seen challenges, and help point out areas where they can play more on the offense and be ready for those challenges, and communicate to their teams and plan extensively as necessary to really feel prepared and to prepare their own teams for what's coming next in OneStream.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I love the analogy of kind of the game day analogy, getting people ready for game time. So let's talk about your experiences. I really would like to spend some time with you today on understanding how you help prospective OneStream customers understand what a OneStream project would look like. Because we talk with our prospects and we work closely with OneStream when prospects are considering OneStream solutions. Yep. So what, in that kind of role, what kind of questions do you get? What kind of advice do you generally give those prospects?
Yeah, a lot of different questions, but I think the most common one that we hear from every single one of our customers is, what is the level of effort look like from us? What should we expect from our teams? How much time do we need to dedicate to this project? And of course, the answer varies for everyone. One customer is one customer, but my general advice to them and our consistent Nova advice to them is, really, the periods of the highest level of effort are the kickoff and requirements sessions. And there's a couple areas, but one of them is the kickoff and requirement sessions. And that really, those sessions, spending time in those sessions reveals a lot about how our customers work as a team with each other and as a team with us. And we can generally answer the question about the level of effort with a more refined approach after those kickoff and requirement sessions, where we learn a little bit more. So I'd say plan to be engaged in those and really spend some time in those sessions. Plan to be in person and engage, and we learn each other quickly. It's almost like preparing for a marathon, but you've never been a runner. So you've got to figure it out. You have to figure out which shoes give you blisters, and if you're eating before or after, if you're better in the morning or the evening when you're training. And some of that takes the experience of actually doing the work, using real examples, meeting the team so everybody's aligned and engaged. So I'd say overall the answer would be plan for heavy time during kickoff requirements. And then with that in mind, plan to spend time with us during prototyping and with each other during prototyping, user acceptance testing, parallels, the major milestones of the project as heavy time, both with the project team and some of the business stakeholders. And then once a week, that core project team focus keeps everybody aligned as the level of effort from the teams and can disseminate from there.
Perfect. Yeah. And I love the marathon too. So I'm going to stay with that. So you're getting ready for that marathon, or we're getting ready for our OneStream project. So those pre-project steps that really help our customers create that outcome and lead to a successful outcome with their OneStream implementation. Could you share some of your experiences on what are the characteristics of those customer pre-project steps that help achieve those success?
Yeah, I think for customers to really know what it is they want to achieve, if they think forward to the end of the project, what's the goal of the project to keep a true north? And so many times with the OneStream project, people get so excited about the capability of OneStream, and it can do this and it can do that and it can do a million different things. And that's awesome. We love that excitement, but trying to keep in mind, what do you want to say you achieved at the end? What is it that we're trying to solve for? Really helps to avoid one of the most common pitfalls that I'm sure we'll continue to talk about, which is competing priorities. Those things tend to overshadow the project if it's not carefully planned. So knowing what you want to achieve and keeping that true north and planning around those conflicts is a big one. I think staying organized and making sure that you have the right passionate team members assigned to the project and not just the people who happen to be available as the project kicks off is another important one to make sure that you're leading to success. And a third one might be just as simple as setting up a steering committee. We always encourage that. We like to have the regular cadence with executives to avoid the bottlenecks that sometimes come from not keeping everybody aligned, so that they can in turn set expectations with their own teams and keep everybody apprised of the progress.
Okay, so let's flip that on its head then and really talk about the opposite. So pitfalls you've seen. I'm sure you've seen enough projects to see your share of kind of common pitfalls. What should people try to avoid as finance leaders when they're preparing for initiating their OneStream project?
Yep, I think it's such an important question. And I wish every single one of our customers would ask us about the pitfalls. We try to tell them whether they ask or not, but it's a really good way to avoid making the same mistake as somebody else, a competitor in your space that's already been through it once. So I'd say the inverse of getting too excited about all the capabilities of OneStream is not paying enough attention to the capabilities of OneStream. So one major pitfall that we've seen over and over, where we come in and are asked to assess a prior implementation from a prior OneStream implementer that would not be us, is not paying enough attention to the idea that OneStream shouldn't be considered a lift and shift from the current solution. If a customer has a current like solution to OneStream that's not platform-based, that's not as powerful, that doesn't have extensibility. They just want to get out of their current solution and shift over to OneStream. You're just not harnessing the full power of what OneStream has to offer. And that's a really big mistake. And we end up coming and helping customers out who've made that mistake in the past to stop and reassess and really think about what they want to achieve. I'd also say not assigning the right leaders to the project who are going to be thoughtful about the business needs. It goes hand in hand with that, just not just checking a box, but really thinking about what your individual business needs. OneStream is configurable and it should suit your own data and your own reporting needs. And so going back to thinking about that from the beginning. And then some other maybe ideas is if you don't schedule the blocks of times on the calendars for the major events coming, people will have creative ways to ask for extensions on the project, and it can fall apart for something as tactical as just not planning ahead and scheduling out. And maybe the last piece of advice here would be sometimes we see our customers cutting scope to save money, and that seems like a good idea at the time, but sometimes that just extends the timeline and the cost because you're not prepared as a customer to do some of the work yourself that you think you can bring back in-house, or you think that you want to push ahead for a timeline that's unreasonable and you can get your teams behind it and they end up with competing priorities anyway, and you end up extending the time and it costs more money. Our team can help. We hear these themes. Our team can help develop. We can do our own chart of accounts. We can handle our own data validation. We can do our own user training. We can manage our own project. Can you? Probably. Do you have the right resources in place to do that today with your current teams that are probably very busy? Very likely the answer is no, unless you've hired for that purpose. Really paying attention to those kinds of things helps avoid big pitfalls in our world.
Okay. So I'd assume as a leader that's got to navigate those pre-project pitfalls, being aware of those and then actioning them is really your advice. Be curious if you've got anything to add to that. But in addition to the things you mentioned, maybe what are some of the key activities that leaders should have and get their teams focus on to prepare for that project and ensure its success?
Yeah, it's an important follow-on questions. First is tactical answer, and the second question you're adding on is, well, so what can leadership do about it? And I think when considering the cost and timeline, really stop and listen during that first implementation phase or even during the sales cycle to the pros and cons and the trade-offs of cutting scope, bringing ahead timeline, or pushing back timeline. Listen to the folks that have done it before, listen to other people in the industry who have gone through an implementation, and think about what the trade-offs are and decide what's valuable to you as leaders. I also think it's critically important that leaders set the tone across their teams that the OneStream project is critical, and ask the leaders to prioritize that project work. If with enough thoughtful planning, you can prioritize anything, especially if you emphasize as a leader or as leaders that OneStream will eventually eliminate those current pain points, and maybe give real examples of how OneStream is going to eliminate the pain points. Reporting is a great example. It makes it a little easier once you get into guided reporting to get what you need with just a couple clicks of a button instead of creating a customized report. And then carve out that realistic time to support the work effort. If we go back to the marathon analogy, OneStream is not a switch that flips to move from one system to the other, and nor would you probably want it to be, because then you're back to change management and nobody likes quick change like that. Take advantage of that implementation cycle and the time to socialize the concept of OneStream, get the teams familiar with what's coming and supportive with their own colleagues. When they see something great in a prototype, let them have the time to take it back and get their own teams excited about it. And then by the time you get there, it feels like it's a painless process and you're just running another day. It's not a marathon anymore. It's just another day of training.
Okay, you touched on the importance and aspect of communicating with the team in a couple ways. The prioritization, getting the right people there and assigned, and also just getting them mentally prepared for what we're intending to do. But are there certain methods or mechanisms you've seen that are more effective for finance leaders as they communicate those things and they get their team aligned and ready for taking on those activities?
Yeah, definitely. Each culture is wildly different. So whatever those leaders are comfortable with that's the first answer there. If the culture is a culture of meetings, do the meetings. If the culture is a culture of emails, do the emails. But I think if I was to give overarching advice, it would be as many modalities of communication as possible. So If you particularly as a leader like to have meetings, you might be 3 steps away from a person who likes to receive information in email. So do both. I'd say our most successful projects involve a variety of forms of communication. That might look like a global email to kick off the project, or a global meeting, or a global video of a leader to kick off a project. It's probably discussions in regular team meetings to make sure that you're continuing to talk about OneStream and what's coming. Key leadership meetings before the big events like user acceptance testing to help teams prepare and understand what's coming and what's expected of them. We've seen newsletters be really effective, and that could be digital or email or on a SharePoint site. And those shared sites like SharePoint or whatever modality the customer uses as a reference point for dedicated information is always helpful. Having training videos or even a list of those first emails or newsletters is a really powerful documentation tool, especially in this world of heavy turnover. You have new employees starting. You don't want to have to start at square one with them. You point them to a site where they can go and self-serve and learn more about OneStream as they get up to speed. Internet sites are great for clients who use those. Really overarching goal is frequent updates in as many formats as your team ingests in their regular work cycle.
And there's got to be a customer that you just think of as the model here, maybe it's setting the gold standard. So do you have an example that you could share with us of a customer you've worked with that really excelled at this pre-project prep phase, and really what impact did it have on the overall OneStream implementation?
Yeah, two customers as examples in my mind. First, with communication, which they knocked it out of the park by being ready with an implementation site before we even arrived. They had their teams ready and knowing where to go, looking at one common source of data. It was a SharePoint site for them, but it doesn't have to be. It could be anything like that. And really, they drove their own communication plan, had a communication team ready to distribute newsletters as needed and make sure that everyone's informed. It was fantastic. Very well organized and thoughtful approach. But for the pre-project preparation, I think of that as a recent customer. So the first example I gave is a customer that's been a customer of ours for several years. But the pre-prep, I have to give the gold star to one of our newest clients. They took such a big step back after just a few cautionary points from us during scoping the sales cycle and stopped and said, okay, maybe we need to think about this differently. Would you be willing to come in, Nova, and provide a few days of consultation before we even start with kickoff, just to make sure that our house is in order and our upstream data is ready to go? They just understood that what they needed was to spend more time post-sales cycle, but before they really started, so that they could roll up their sleeves and be ready and prepared and hit the ground running in that cycle. So we did. We went in and we did a kind of a pre-requirement session with them, and that session drove a lot of clarity around what we expected, what they expected, what OneStream has to offer with their real data. Because at that point we had signed an NDA. So we're looking at real examples, which always makes it easier. And it ultimately allowed us to empower them, the customer, to find the right artifacts and personnel. And they made different decisions during those meetings and after to support what they perceive as a project that's clear in their mind. They're ready to go. And we were so impressed by the foresight they had to just pause. Speed was not the goal for them. It's doing it right and taking that ability to step back and ensure that quality and efficiency are more important than speed, we think is going to set them up to be unbelievably efficient. So you'll have to ask me about that in another episode, and I'll give you the read up of what happens with them as they continue on.
Well, that's a great wrap up to the pre-project. And yeah, sometimes you have to slow down to really speed up in the end. Love that counsel and advice. And I will make note to come back around in maybe 9 months and ask you about the success we achieved. Okay, so let's move on in the life cycle of a project and really talk about during the implementation. So we've set it up, we've talked about the pre-project, during the project. So what should customers and finance leaders in particular know and expect to do during that project? You've touched on examples, but what else might you add?
Sure. If it's a project with Nova, we know that we'll get you familiar with OneStream with your own data early. So expect that. You will expect to look at it and see it as we go. It's not just we come in for requirements and we give you the solution at the end. We want to seek frequent affirmation that we are building the right way to meet your expectations, not just for the requirements that you gave us, but that as you see it, you agree that the design still makes business sense for you as the customer. We know that most of you have never seen OneStream before with your own eyes in your own business. So we want to constantly check back and make sure we're still tracking and it still makes sense and it's logical, and you don't see it and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not what we expected. We need something different. So be ready for those checks and be willing to articulate this isn't right. And maybe we need to do it a little differently now that we understand the business value. We might not have given you the right requirements, or Nova might not have understood it right. So have that conversation and be ready to understand that the time you spend up front in those conversations makes such a better product at the end, and it makes the go live feel easy. We're there by the time we get there. Everybody's aligned in an agreement. That's what to expect during OneStream project with Nova.
Okay, some of the challenges, I'm interested in the challenges customers face. What are typical challenges and how they can prep for them? I already heard you touch on one of them is just put the time in, but what are some other common challenges?
Yeah, sure. I think there are some of these are absolutely themes both here in this discussion, but also with our customers. And the number one, I don't think this makes a OneStream project unique, but with any big implementation, is just competing priorities. It just is. That's something that everybody has to face in this fast-paced world, especially in the financial world where the calendar drives you. There's always going to be competing priorities. Planning ahead for that, again, making sure that you're sitting down and thinking it through, calendarizing as much as possible to protect your team's time is huge. And that gets into the second biggest challenge, which is time management. Assuming that your team is going to have time for something when they barely have time today is tough. So one particular example that comes to mind is our customers frequently think that they have a lot of time for data validation and that they'll be able to do that successfully. And are they the right experts? For sure. Do they have the right time in their day to do it? They might. If you ask me about my time in May, I'll tell you I have plenty of time in May, but by the time May gets here, I don't have any time left. So really thinking through and making sure that time management is effectively prioritized is critical. And then getting the right resources engaged and supporting is, you've heard me say it before, I'll say it again in multiple podcasts, having the right person engaged and supporting and passionate about OneStream, and making sure that resource is not just someone that was plucked from a team somewhere else that happens to have the time, is vital to the success of OneStream. And then recognizing and fixing issues that are upstream from OneStream. Maybe your ERP has data issues, or you have an overall business process issue as you go. You can't just stop and address that later. Doing it concurrently with the OneStream project really helps to make a successful project at the end of the day.
Okay, so I imagine managing a customer's expectations has got to be a key to your role and really helping them get to the outcome, because you're constantly adjusting approach is what I'm hearing based upon your requirement sessions, design workshops, new things that pop with business during a project. But maybe you can touch on that and really talk to us about how do you help a customer and a finance leader manage expectations. Part of that's dealing with those unexpected issues, building up some resilience, being prepped for that. And what's really the role that a finance leader should have? And what's the part that an implementation partner like Nova Advisory plays in adjusting the project outcome, the project rather execution to those unexpected challenges?
Great questions. I think truly great leaders always know that the plan will never go according to plan, and they're ready for unexpected issues, and they understand that it's about how the team comes together to address the issues versus the fact that issues are going to arise. And to that extent, just as something as simple as keeping weekly meetings with the project team so that you can talk through those issues as they arise and not hold them until you get face time with those leaders. We talked a little about the importance of a steering committee earlier on. That's really critical so that when issues arise, you've got the right audience, the right team in the room to either approve, mitigate, decide, defer right there, and they have access to all the right people so that you can continue to quickly move past any roadblocks or any major issues that come up. It all stems around communication, but having the right resources in place to communicate efficiently is really important. And as a OneStream implementation partner, Nova does our part to guide the customer through those unexpected issues. We would never just throw an issue over the wall and say, here's the issue, figure it out. We'll come with recommendations for mitigation. And that might not just be limited to OneStream. It might not be a OneStream issue that's the roadblock. It might be an upstream issue or a business process issue. And we have an advisory team that can also make those recommendations and suggestions for functional business issues that will arise as the project continues to unfold.
Great examples. Thank you. Just like we did with pre-project, I'm assuming you've got some examples teed up in your head for during the project success. So do you have I guess you should say, success in effectively dealing with challenges and how they overcame them? So do you have some models of customers who've done that well, and what were the key factors that really contributed to their overall success in the end?
Yeah, one comes to mind immediately, and it's a big challenge. So I'm sure anybody who's gone through system implementations can appreciate this, or even folks that are contemplating a system implementation. We had one client that realized that they needed an ERP implementation at the same time they needed their OneStream implementation. And at first, this seemed like a complete barrier, conflicting priorities all over the place. You needed the same teams involved and engaged, not enough people to do both. And we sat back with this customer and worked through the initial reaction, both on their side and on our side. This was a big lift, and decided that maybe there was an opportunity here. We collectively agreed that this could be valuable with the crossover on the project teams, because a lot of times we end up needing to remap or redesign a global chart because there's an ERP that we are stuck with. But if we could design both at the same time, it ultimately led to streamlining everything for success and a better timeline for both. It surprised us, and had we not sat down and had the discussion, and there was a willingness to take a little bit of a risk for efficiency, we wouldn't have been as successful. So the key factor that contributed was sitting down, talking about the barriers, talking about the pros and cons, and figuring out how we could use kind of the lemons here to make the lemonade and make everything successful. And it was a wild success. And we ended up with cleaner products on both sides. Everyone would agree.
Okay, so we've wrapped up a successful project. After a project, I think we touched on after a project with prior episode 9 when we talked about people and change. But imagine things are constantly going to evolve in an organization's business, and the finance leader needs to evolve the OneStream program with that. Any kind of after successful implementation advice you'd give to a finance leader?
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I think you can break it down into maybe 3 categories. I'd say listen, plan, and assign. And when I say listen, it would be something I touched on a little earlier. Go talk to somebody who's implemented OneStream before, and seek their counsel. Ask them what they would have done differently, or what they can do to make a better product at the end, what they're doing today. Most of our customers who have OneStream continue to turn on certain new solutions in OneStream and continue to evolve. So learn from the people who have gone before you, really listen to them, take their advice where you can. In terms of planning, I talked about planning and calendaring for your business needs, but I would say a click deeper would be plan bi-directionally if you can. So instead of just figuring out what your go live needs to be, because you might have an executive priority to look ahead and plan for a big event, you have an annual plan and you want to be in OneStream before you get to annual plan, or you have an end of system life coming up and you've got to be live before then. Those are targets that you're probably going to have to meet, but also spend some time thinking about what you have to implement after. Really consider your other business priorities and plan around them, and do what our gold standard new customer is going to do, and stop in order to make it better, and really stop and think, okay, what can we wait until after a big event happens at our company where we're going to have distraction and focus, so that we can make sure that we plan both ways and get to a really realistic timeline. And then when it comes to assignment, clearly identifying owners and stakeholders we talked about as early as possible. And the goal here is to be sure they see themselves as part of the initiative. It's not the Nova team or the OneStream team. It's all of us together as customer, as the team, so that everyone's accountable for the project success and all working together to row in the same direction. And then when you find those amazing people within your own group, recognize their extraordinary efforts that they're putting in time above and beyond their daily jobs in most cases. That little bit of pat on the back goes a long way towards a great project at the end when there's that recognition.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can probably call that a wrap unless you've got any parting words and maybe tell people where they could reach you if they'd like to get in touch.
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I hope that your implementation is successful as the ones that Nova's had in the past. We look forward to talking to you all soon.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining CPM Customer Success, Susan, and we'll catch you on a future episode, I'm sure.
Thanks, Andy.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of CPM Customer Success. Reminder to check out the CPM Customer Success weekly email newsletter to stay informed on the latest CPM Customer Success episodes and news. Go to the Nova Advisory website, novaadvisory.com/podcast, and subscribe to the CPM Customer Success podcast newsletter today. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of CPM Customer Success.